Hey everybody, Tom Barnes Stories from the 78, and we all have this soundtrack that is pivotal to certain parts of our life. And Jack's Mannequin, Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, and even Something Corporate all play pivotal roles throughout my life. I remember starting off at my first radio station job ever, and Something Corporate was everywhere. So this is really cool that I get to talk to Andrew McMahon now for this story from the 78 as Jack's Mannequin on a reunion tour here coming to Chicago at the Salt Shed Friday, June 20th. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing well. You know, I've watched your career from, TV when people used to have, Rolling Stone, the magazine, and music videos and stuff like that. Since my journey, I started off in radio in 2005, and now I'm in television and digital. So I've seen you go through all these different facets of your career. So it's a pleasure to talk with you. And I can't believe we're talking about 20 years of Jack's Mannequin, the band in between the two bookends so far.
Yeah. It's a wild deal to have anything that you did exist for 20 years, and to be able to sort of relive this moment with the band and with fans has been really beautiful so far.
You were going to be here in Chicago at the Salt Shed, June 20th. Have you played there yet?
No, but I'm so excited.
Dude,
I've heard amazing things.
It is absolutely stunning play. It is I've been to a lot of shows across the country. It's probably one of the most unique indoor and outdoor spaces together because they're totally different vibes for each. But when the outdoor show is going on, they have the doors open so you can walk inside. Vice versa. It's just this crazy campus that is all about music, art, creativity, and then you have Goose Island Brewery that's part of it. So
nice.
You got everything you need right there. But with this show coming up, I imagine, I read a little bit about you started off in Portland, right? Is that the first show?
Yeah, we're up in Maine for the first show. We're on, I think, our 5th or 6th tonight in Richmond. It's funny. We started with like 3 huge shows. So it was like, we did Philly, New York, and Boston, like back to back. It was like a pretty intense way to, usually you want to kind of stretch out and figure out the kinks, where you just like got thrown right into it.
Well, you mentioned, getting out the kinks and all that stuff. You've dabbled in playing some of Jack's stuff throughout the years.
Of course,
I know you've done some stuff when the pandemic was happening and the drive-ins and all that stuff to adapt. And I read something about the way people could connect with you through something similar to what we're doing now, like through a website where you offered things and really discovered a different way to kind of hang out with your fans, right? Like, in doing so, like what else did going through that process and at that time, help complement you going through this process today?
Well, I think, the pandemic was, it was the weirdest time for everybody, but what I found was that, it just hammered home the why of this thing in the first place, right? It's like music is a place for people to connect, right? And to build community and in so many ways, like doing the drive-ins, doing the Instagram live shows, like, creating stuff from home for people to help ease the burden or the anxiety that was generated in that time. It eventually led to us starting an online community called Camp Wilderness. So just a place where like people who are diehard fans can go and get access to tickets early. Just a place to really cultivate people who are into the band enough that they want information first and all of that, things that sometimes the algorithm doesn't help you cut through the noise on. And so, it's been a really, post pandemic, I think really realizing where fans are at and trying to meet them there and super serve them in ways that it hasn't always been easy to do just via whatever the typical web and social media channels offer, has been great. And for this last 2 years of reunions with these bands, it's been neat because we've been able to like really in a like a high touch way, like send people stuff in the mail and get fans engaging and meeting each other. And it's created it's really fostered the sense of community around these shows.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like old school fan clubs from like back in the day where
Yeah.
the only thing you could really do to reach out to your favorite band was send like this random postcard in the mail, hope you get something back, and then
Yep.
lo and behold you would, and you instantly were connected to the band, and you had the the concert poster that was only available to fan club members.
Yep.
That when your friends would come over, like, that fucking rules, right? Like you have
Yep.
all of these things. That is such a unique way, and a lot of bands didn't do that, so
Yep.
good on you for seeing that and really find, like you said it earlier, you finding where your audience is. So much of today is, well, this is what we're doing, and if you want to come see us, you can come see us, which is fine, and it
Yeah.
works for lots of other things. But to go and find where your fans are, and then to remind them and show them why this music matters so much, I think is wonderful. And when you mentioned at the top of your tour, I think it was in a Rolling Stone article I read about how this is going to be a little bit anxious for you. Like your therapist is going to be on call because you're diving
She
back.
was my last call before I talked to you.
Well, there you go. Well, how poignant. But I imagine, to dig back into this particular part of your life, because this is a huge transitional period. You were coming out of something corporate. You were trying to find out what you were going to do after that. You got sick, and that parlays to even today with $1 of the proceeds of all these shows going to the foundation that you founded. But I imagine with terrifying to go back and to really truly relive these catalogs versus kind of dipping your toes in and out with songs here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really been it's been a journey. It's been a process, right? Like I feel like when we went out on this something corporate tour, it was almost really easy to map what the why of that experience was going to be, which was, for the first time in really 20 years, that lineup was on stage together, and it was healing and bright, and like, we're playing these songs from when we were kids, and we're grown men and still good friends, and it's working,
Mm-hmm.
With this, I think I really had to steer into the why, and for me, it was going through all these old, I digitized all of my home videos and journals and things from that period of time, and like, and yeah, it is a tricky period of my history to revisit. Look, it's like I've spent a lot of time in the years since Jack's Mannequin wound down, trying to get a better handle on what it was to be sick and to be a survivor, and how complicated that really was. And I've done a lot of that work already. I think diving back into this catalog, it certainly, it's triggering in ways, especially if you consider that we're on this tour 20 years from the time that I was diagnosed, and went through the sort of, early stages of that part of the journey. But in going back through the movies of the first tour, and then getting well and getting back on the road and seeing just, how lucky I was to be surrounded by these amazing musicians who helped, not only helped get me through that tough moment, but helped make this music come to life in the aftermath. It sort of hammered home the why, which was just like, it's time to feel these things deeply. It's time to play these songs with some perspective, as opposed to, from what felt oftentimes like a very embattled place. Because it wasn't easy to write them, it wasn't easy to record them, it wasn't easy to release them, and to be able to take a little bit more of a lightness and a reverence to the stage with these songs and say, we survived this together, and let's celebrate it, has been beautiful.
I think I read somewhere too that even doing the music video that accompanied the TV show One Tree Hill, you were like racing across the country, still
Yeah.
not feeling great, but you wanted to do this thing. I imagine a lot of what that was, was a form of trauma for sure, just because you're dealing with being sick and you're doing all these things to get by. And I'm sure music was healing in that it's of itself. But looking back now, going through and looking at that, are you surprised by either some of the vulnerability or some of the strength that you showed with the way that you wrote those songs? Were you like, when you hear them now, are you like, oh shit, yeah, I totally remember that moment right there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I for every, for my life, from the time I was 9 writing music up until I was 22 and recovering from cancer, music was like my refuge, right? It was like, I could sit down and just, and that was where I put it. The trick about my, getting back to music after being sick was all of a sudden now music was wrapped up in this existing trauma, right? And so it really, especially those follow-up Jack's Mannequin records, it was like, so much of it was a fight, and there was writer's block, and there were all these things, and it would be like when a song would come to me and would click, it was like, oh, I can breathe again, and like and so it really made my relationship with music much more tricky in the aftermath. And I also think, looking back at a lot of those videos, I jumped right back into work because it was the only thing I knew how to do, and you can't rewrite your life, and you can't, it's easy to armchair quarterback your history.
Yeah, sure.
But there are definitely moments where I see myself doing interviews with people, and I'm, my hair is barely grown back, and I just look like a deer in the headlights, and people are trying to talk to me about being a survivor and being a hero. And I was, quietly really going through something very profound and very painful. And so that, I think, has been the trickiest part of this, is looking back at that guy right after getting well and going, what the fuck were you doing running around the country, doing interviews and playing, 150 shows a year? You should have been like, taking care of yourself. But it happened. That's the way it happened.
I mean, I've seen how cancer, unfortunately, has affected people like everybody else in the world. My mother 3 times, and my mother's name Cecilia, by the way.
Wow.
And
my Saint Cecilia. Right
here. And I can't imagine doing shows as often as you did. And, thank God for being young, I suppose, to be able to do all that at that time. And now with playing these songs with all that perspective and that runway behind you, do you get a different joy out of it now? Do you get an audience reaction that might be a little different than back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think a large part of this has been about, redeeming some of those years a little bit, getting, I think because I had such a complicated relationship with the Glass Passenger and with people and things, because it represented something, they both represented something sort of painful, right? That I was trying to work through. I think it made truly enjoying those songs on stage at the time that they were released a little more difficult, because it was just wrapped up in so much. Getting to this place now where I feel like I've moved through a lot of that, a lot of that grief or shame or whatever it was that was wrapped up in those songs, to be able to step onto a stage and do like television or Annie, Use Your Telescope or whatever, I can appreciate where I was in those moments, but I also I come to it now with like a sort of like a sense of gratitude that I had a place to put those emotions. And despite the fact that I wasn't dealing with most of what was going on in a healthy way, the songs were still these artifacts of aspiring towards an understanding of what I was going through. And I can see that more clearly now when I'm on stage with these songs.
And people who are in the venue on June 20th here in Chicago will get to see it all on full display. Will it just be Jack's songs? Will you go back to
Oh
something
yeah,
corporate, or you could do it or strictly Jack's?
it's Jack's Mannequin night, baby. All
Awesome.
Jack's all night long.
And is there a certain way you're doing the set? Or are you like starting from song one and going through the albums? Or are you just picking the ones that sound like a good vibe for that particular playlist and that night?
It's a little bit of both. So, because it is like the official 20-year Everything in Transit anniversary, we're getting most of those songs in the set list every night. And then, obviously we play the big songs,
Sure, yeah,
but
of course.
there's enough time that it's been, there's a little bit of scaffolding on the set right now that may change where it's like, first few songs so I can get in a rhythm and get the audience with me. And then for the middle of the set, we go into pretty free form, like, okay, let's pull this one and let's play this B-side. Let's try this from this record that barely ever got played. And
Yeah,
so
because you have a couple
So
of those B-sides that are like hidden classics.
yeah. I mean, there's like more than an album's worth of B-sides that we're slowly trying to unpack and build into sets. But there hasn't been a single show of the first 5 or 6 that's been the same. And I plan on kind of trying to keep that energy going through the rest of the tour.
Right on, man. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I'd be remiss to not ask you about Brian Wilson, the Beach Boy that passed away, and if he had any effect on your songwriting or the way that you conduct yourself with a band or whatnot, just because it's in the news. And, Paul McCartney said, God only knows probably the best song ever written. Now that's up for debate for eternity, but did he have any impact on your life?
Massive. Yeah. I mean, well, God Only Knows was my first dance.
Wow.
The bridesmaids at our wedding walked down to quartet playing Surfer Girl. Like, the impact that Brian had on my music is profound. I really, I grew up with the Beach Boys in my house because my parents were children of the 60s. My mom grew up in Pasadena. Like, these were, so I always knew the Beach Boys, but it was as I started working on Everything in Transit that I really truly discovered Pet Sounds, and it became the single most played record for me through the year and a half that I was working on the music for Everything in Transit. And so much of my mission in the studio and with that song, with the songwriting on that record specifically, was about honing and reaching for that high bar of melody and arrangement that Brian set with that record and with his career in general. And over the years, I was really fortunate because I was well known to be a huge Brian fan. That I got to be in the audience sitting next to Van Dyke Parks when they filmed the Smile, when they did the Smile taping when he released Smile, and I did press supporting the release of that record, and got to open for Brian once and meet him,
I didn't know that. Very cool.
Have some correspondence between him and Melinda, his wife, and so there is a very, very huge part of my heart that is occupied by Brian and the Beach Boys, and seeing that he passed yesterday was deeply affecting, and I will forever be indebted to him for the way he's inspired my songwriting and my dedication to the craft of bringing songs into the world is largely inspired by Brian.
I mean, they say never meet your heroes, but in this case, it sounded like that was worth the gamble with the impact that he's had.
I mean, it was great. I mean, we high-fived in the hallway on the way between sets at one of his shows, and it was like, yeah, I mean, what do you say? I was just basically bowed and thanked him, and yeah, he's there are a few who've done for pop music and for rock music to push it outside of its comfort zone, and the statements of the Beatles, I think, are a huge testament to that, in the way that he incorporated traditional arrangement and made it rock and roll is a legacy that you just are never going to be able to mess with that.
And I heard recently that he did spend some time in Chicago living here for whatever period of time in his life.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we ran a little story about it earlier today where I heard that. I was like, I didn't know that. But
Yeah.
either way, there it is. You'll be here June 20th. I hope you get to enjoy the city because, you know, June in Chicago, between June and like end of September, you can't go wrong in this city. And the view that
Nah.
you're going to see, you're going to love.
I can't wait. I spent a few years in Chicago as a kid. I lived in Winnetka for a little bit when I was younger, and so I have history there and friends there.
John
And
Hughes territory.
yeah. I mean, I met John Candy when he was doing Uncle Buck.
What?
You know, like, you know, Home Alone was filmed in my town when I was living there. You know, it was a cool time to be there. It was during the Bulls three-peat. I mean, it was prime time years to be a kid in Chicago. But yeah, so I've got so much love for it. And I mean, if it weren't for the fact that we're doing Red Rocks on this run, this will for a brief moment hold the record as the largest headlining show that I've ever sold out. So I'm pretty excited to get to do that in a place that I called home for a time.
Yeah, homecoming of sorts, if you will.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Be well.